Continuing these discussions with Jonathan Moreno. So let me. And what I know from talking with you, seeing what you're reading is a lot of it is about neuroscience. Yeah, which is an interest we share. Yes. So it was, let's see. Oh, yes. It was something called the Barbados group. It wasn't a Barbados group to start with. It didn't have that name, but it was about some of the ideas that I was developing. And I got together with a bunch of thinkers and practitioners and asked them to be with me to discuss these ideas. And one of them, Bruce Gregory, Bruce Gregory. Oh, he was actually in that film, which was great. He's the guy from the astrophysicist and are at the Harvard, one of the blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I can't remember anyone. Yes, it's the other school up there in Boston. So not Harvard. That's right. Yes, exactly. Oh, MIT is probably talking about. MIT question mark? Because here we are talking about the nature of being. What is the nature and function of being for human beings? And what is the possibility of being for human beings? In other words, what is it that you wind up with? And what's possible beyond what you wound up with? And, he's the guy who got me started on neuroscience. But a lot of other people, not just me, but a lot of other people in that grid. So here's, I think, in today's world, in today's world, if you're not informed by neuroscience, you're in trouble. You're likely to step into some landmines that neuroscience would help you to get out of. So let me just give you a quick example in the work that I show. We have this thing called creating course leaders, within which we train university professors to teach this leadership course that my colleagues and I developed. And one of the things I start is with everything going on in your chair is caused by your brain. And there isn't anybody who's there. I probably know neuroscientists who wouldn't agree with that. There's nothing going on in your chair that isn't caused by your brain. Yeah, but blah, 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 blah. So here's what's happens for me. It washes away a lot of the nonsense that I've heard about that. I was taught that I read about and that others have told me about washes it away, because I'm clear that every word out of my mouth is not picked by me. It's picked by my brain. And this thing I refer to when I say I or me is also generated by my brain. Yeah. Now, I don't think that's the whole story, but I think that until you can get yourself comfortable about that, there's a lot of blind alleys down which you are likely to go. So, yeah, I think that to have access to the nature and function of what it is to be human, both the way I wound up being and the possibilities beyond the way I wound up being, that there's a lot more to do within the materialist, as it would be called, view. But I think that without that, I know, because it went down some blind alleys that I had to come back out of. And it's helped to keep me out of certain blind alleys. So that's the neuroscience story in a nutshell. So a big, big turn. Now, somebody asked about the Moscow project. Yeah. Can you talk about the Moscow project? And well, you know, that's what's going on there. Yeah, I can't. And oh, I do remember. It's amazing. Anything I remember is amazing. Trust me. It was an Episcopalian priest who did a lot of the work, but I'm sorry, I don't remember the man's name. And I should really, great guy who got me interested in at that time was what was going on in the Soviet Union and what could be done to maybe make some kind of difference in the Soviet Union. So the first number of times that I went, it was the Soviet Union. And one of the colleagues that I went with was an economist. He had been the chief economist for some big firm, and I can't remember at any rate. We didn't make much headway. We really did not make much headway. David, I won't get the last thing. David, the last name, would argue David, Episcopalian priest in Moscow area. Was this late 1970s? Grabner, priest in Moscow. Was it Reverend Dr. John David Grabner? Fall of Berlin Wall. St. Andrew's Anglican Church in Moscow. Chaplain, St. Andrew's. Reverend Tyler Strand from Linsky. Pastor David Priest named David in the late 1989. Figure. Oh, he's an economist. I don't think he's talking about the priest. Economist. Was it called Project Scout? David Lipton? Moscow in the early 1990s. Following in the late 1980s. Lipton, maybe. He would argue with the parties, and I would see if there was a way to create some opening. Now, we did get a chance to work and what was called as Nonya Society. Nyonya Food and Culture. Nyonya, Alaska. Nyonya Society for sort of female face. SSR. Nyonya Society might be misspelled, mix up terms, nostalgia for the USSR. Nyonya under Soviet. No New Society was the Soviet, everything in the Soviet Union was guilt. Enormous was it, quote, that Lana translated to the old All Union Knowledge Society. And it was where it was where all the education went on. So I did get a chance to deliver some programs there. And through that, I got an opportunity to become friends with, well, that's too strong of a word. I became associates with the university with professors from and I can't remember the name of the university, but that at least they thought it was the Harvard Business School of the Soviet Union. But then, I started to hear about the transition with Gorbachev. Yeah, and I would do a program at at that university, and they would say, "Well, we heard all that from Gorbachev," which was interesting. Yeah, and they had the training. Excuse me, had he had he done the training? Asking about Gorbachev. No. He'd done some of the training, yes. He'd seen them. He'd done say, yeah, it's pretty interesting. Would he ever, whatever he did, but well, them, the Esalen group, as you know, Mike Murphy, yep, had a big program in the 60s and 70s, also with the Soviet Union. Yep, yes. And I don't know today what Mike thinks about that, but it was a frustration. I think he wanted Esalen to be better known. Esalaen, for that effort. Then they were bringing up Mike Murphy. It just reminds me that I haven't been clean. It's Mike. It's Mike's. Is Mike still alive? Oh, I'll have to get in touch with him. Remember times after dinner at the Franklin house when I would sit on Mike's chest because I pushed him down on the floor trying to explain something to him, as only a real friend would do. Exactly. Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, he likewise explains a bit. Yeah, that's right. He had things to explain. Exactly. And George Leonard was, of course, part of that whole contingent. Originally, time life wasn't yet known. Postpone the New York Newsweek. Doesn't know what's up here. It was a 1 year magazine at the time, was one of the best magazines at the time, almost equal with, like, was it Look? What I think it was Look. I think that's right. So I'm sorry for the. Yeah, I'm in this speak for yourself. Yeah. It's like I would, all my life. I was a kid. Now I am one of the older ones. And I demand a certain respect for my age. You're not going to get it here. Another name, and then a couple questions are, wake up, please. Just questions coming up. Alan Watts. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Very moved. Obviously touched and moved by what I learned from Alan. He really opened up a gate. He opened up the door. My work with Alan opened the door to something that I have access to without the work. No, I didn't have access to. Without the work that I did with Alan, and I shouldn't say the work, I shouldn't. The work Alan did on me is the way I should say that. And that would be the right way. Yeah, extraordinary guy. Really, really remarkable guy. I think if somebody sat down and read one of his books, maybe the one called The Book. Alan Watts, The Book. The book, yeah. It would be as relevant. I mean, we're in that kind of world now. Yep. So speaking of this world we're in, interesting question. Here, we're in a world house. I'll say this and then our questions, in which there's more people seem to be in a way closing in on themselves or their group or their nationality. People are feeling very much under threat, the other, and so forth. Is it possible to be, and this is roughly a question, is it possible to engage in a transformation in a world in which there are nations and ethnicities and races socially constructed? If there are political parties, ideologies, is it possible to have a real transformation in such a world? I say yes. And I'd like to share about a little bit about why I say yes. Because I don't believe so. I have some pretty good evidence that it's possible. And I learned from this group of paramilitaries in Northern Ireland. The people you saw in the film were not paramilitaries. They were community leaders and people who were making a difference in their communities. The paramilitaries, half of them were just pure gangsters. And a Catholic nun in Northern Ireland, see, I try not to use names, they're Catholic nun in Northern Ireland who was respected by both sides of the conflict, asked me to come work with the Protestant school. Some of you may remember, I mean, so long ago probably, but some of you may remember that Catholic kids had to walk up this long street to get to their grade school. And it was a Protestant street. And they were being harassed and abused. And somebody threw a pipe bomb and so on and so forth. And the school would just traumatize the teachers. So I agreed this. He asked, was that Bloody Sunday? He says, no, it was another one. At any rate, I'm trying to see how the shortness, at any rate, with the teachers at the Catholics, I only tell stories about what turns out well. So I'll just tell you how it turned out. Within 6 months, The children from the Catholic school were going over to the Protestant school across the street, and they're going back and forth, and everything worked out. That wasn't what I wanted to tell you. What I wanted to tell you was that the nun who'd gotten me to do that kind of work asked me if I would with meet with the last paramilitary group that had not given up their guns. There was a program in Northern Ireland where the paramilitaries gave up their guns. The guns were not able to be used to incriminate them in anything as an amnesty, kind of. Yes. And then the general, I've forgotten his last name, was a Canadian that they turned over their guns to. At any rate, so I met with them, and the first time I met with them, with a called us on the phone and told us where to come meet, because you couldn't set up anything in advance with these people. And I was there, and I'm an outsider, of course. And I said, okay, look, I don't know what's the story here. What is going on here with all this conflict? What is going on? So the first guy said blah, 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 for 15 minutes, maybe 20 or 30 minutes. But it was quite a long time. And I said, okay, I got that. And I asked questions, and I said, did you mean? And the next guy did the same thing, exactly the same words. And each person said the same thing over and over and over and over and over. And I told Breeze, I said, look, I don't see any way to make a difference. I'm going to go home and I'll take a look at it. And I went home, and what I realized, Jonathan, was that they kept saying the same thing over and over because they never had the experience that somebody got it. And I said, Bridge, I'm coming back. I don't know who these people are. These are the assistants. Breeze, I'm coming back. And we're going to meet with them one more time. Now, they want to be they want to be heard. They wanted to be gotten even more than heard. But if you think about it, if you've got something to say and somebody actually leaves you with the experience that what was going on where you are is now also going on where the other is, and not that you agree or disagree, just you created the other person, but that's not good enough. You got to leave them with the experience that you've recreated them. In an hour, nobody had anything to say. In the second go round, and then I could first off ask them what was the almost certain future, the predictable future. And nobody liked it. And I said, how would you like to create a new future? And I guess 3 trips after the third trip, I almost got that channeling my mind. Something I can't remember its name. At any rate, I don't tell stories that didn't turn out well, so this one's going to turn out well. 2, they gave up their guns, and they got an award from the government to do community work. And ever since then, that's what they've done. It's community work. And gotten, paid for it. And that was an enormous learning experience for me. Yeah, great. We will continue. Hope you're having a great day. Peace, love, bye.